Today we are coming to you from the Hyatt Hotel in Johannesburg, and on the agenda today is a discussion about the role that ICT can play in improving South Africa's economy. Of course, this theme and this discussion point comes on the back of a recent conference that South Africa hosted for the very first time. That was the International Telecommunication Union World Conference of 2018, which was hosted on the continent, in fact, for the very first time. Now, the theme of that conference was innovation for a smarter digital development, and we'll essentially be unpacking some of the outcomes of the ITU 2018, but also discussing in greater detail the role that ICT can play in advancing growth in our country here in South Africa that we know is battling against a technical recession. So helping us unpack the ITU outcomes as well as discuss the role of ICT in improving growth outcomes here in Africa's largest, or rather most developed economy, I am joined by, in no particular order, Mohammed Simji of A2D24.com. Now, Mohammed has actually won the first prize for the Standard Bank Special SME Award at the ITU Telecom World 2018. Seated next to him is Tepo Tlaku of Pulego Communications. Tepo is also a winner. In fact, he won the ITU 2018 Global SME Excellence Award winner. And then seated next to Tepo, we are graced by the presence of the Deputy Minister of Telecommunications and Postal Services for South Africa, Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams. And seated next to the Minister, we have Janine Zecha, a Sector Head for Entrepreneur Development at Standard Bank. And finally, a gentleman who is no stranger to the channel, Dr. Petrus de Kock, General Manager for Research at Brand South Africa. Well, let us get into the meat of the discussion here that brings us here this morning. Minister, I'd like to begin with you because South Africa did the most, I am hoping, and hosted this first ever ITU conference on the continent. I mean, how do you think that we did, particularly based on the feedback that you received from some of the people that attended?
Well, Fifi and the viewers, wherever they are watching us, one thing that I can tell you is that everybody wants to come back to South Africa. All those that visited, they're like, is it possible for us to get citizenship? They're not saying that because we've got a beautiful country. Of course, we have a beautiful country. But they're saying so because of the things they've observed and those that have been exposed to the humanity of South Africans. By nature, we are warm. We are welcoming, but on top of that, the brains that they've seen, in most cases, they get to read about South Africa, and everything is negative. A man stabbed, a woman raped. Now they get to interact with these people that they think, wow, these are just animals. They get to see the other side, the innovations, as you just mentioned, the two gentlemen that are with us here, getting to be exposed to people who say, we are here in the southern part of Africa, but you are part of the world, and we are prepared to claim our space in terms of providing solutions to whatever challenges the world is facing. So it was a great success, not just for South Africa, but for Africa in its whole.
No, for sure. And Petrus, for you, and specifically speaking as Brand South Africa and selling ICT to the rest of the world, or South Africa's ICT to the rest of the world, how do you think we did at that conference?
No, I think I would link with what the Deputy Minister said, but also there's a bit of a story here, Deputy Minister. I think it's important to, last year, Brand South Africa worked also with the department when South Korea hosted the ITU 2017. That was the year when it was announced we will be hosting this year. So there's actually long work, 2 years of work that we're talking about here, in a very interesting intergovernmental, interdepartmental space. And I want to call that out because sometimes, we talk about events that happen and we have this criticism of government in South Africa that cannot do stuff. But this is a prime example of how things work, at a very phenomenal level. And I think the outcome for us as a country is, in this week, we had a discussion with our CEO also on competitiveness in the 21st century is about adaptation. And it's several levels of adaptation, either at your high technological level, but then in a developing world context, it's adaptation, technological development for human development, and that's a very critical element. And I think through what the minister is doing and a lot of other interventions in the country, I think we're managing to get that message out, because typically in our research we see South Africa is always associated with technological advancement, which is very strange because we produce world-leading patents and all kinds of things. So our job as Brand SA then is, we're not experts on technology or on any of this, but our job then, as Linda said at the beginning, is to elevate and portray that, to beam that into the world, because that's going to become very important from a nation profile point of view in the future.
No, for sure. I mean, everybody in this room was actually taken by surprise at the fact that South Africa was actually the first creator of the CAT scan and the first ATM, and what was it? The smart lock safety syringe. I actually wrote it down. So we are more than just a crime or all the other negative connotations that we get known for. But gentlemen, I'd like to speak to you guys, given that you guys were taken amongst as essentially the cream of your crop. You guys are the winners, and we are interested in exactly what made you guys stand out at the ITU conference there. And Tsepo, can you tell us exactly what Pulego is about?
So Pulego Communications is a software development company that is particularly focused on enabling smart cities. We want to create impact in having safer, cleaner, and healthier cities. So at the City of Tshwane, we have innovated a solution that deals with issues of crime and corruption, enabling the Metro Police to use data to make decisions. Because in many cases, you would find that people report incidents, they are written on paper or on spreadsheets, and we're not leveraging on that data. So we collect it, and we help the city to make decisions, particularly in planning for the city to be safer. So we see ourselves playing a significant role in having South African cities become smart cities. Sure. The reality of the matter is that actually we don't have a choice. Sure. Because of how ICTs are evolving our economies, our social structures, and so forth. So we focus there to see even how can we use IoT as an example to get us to the next level of ensuring that citizens are healthier, they're safer, and they play a role in the economy.
You can tell in a tech junkie by the use of jargon, IoT. I had to think twice there.
Internet of Things, I'm sorry.
Of course, the Internet of Things. And Mohammed, your company name, quite an interesting story, A2D24.com. But tell us about the innovations that you guys have brought to the table.
Sure. So our mission at A2D24 is to solve the world's toughest challenges using technology. Mm-hmm. We do this by finding the most manual processes and automating the hell out of them. That's what makes us excited and gets us excited every day.
Give us a simple example.
So I'll tell you the work that I'm most proud of is our work in public sector healthcare. When we started working with the medicine supply depot, we found that they would place orders using 4-ply dot matrix printouts. And the time from the time an order was received to the time it got to a supplier was 4 days, just the process of taking 4-ply printouts, which I hadn't seen. Actually, I hadn't seen a dot matrix printer, I think, in my life. And peeling apart the 4 pages, walking it around the building to get it signed, and eventually then scanning it and emailing it to a supplier. And you can imagine if it gets lost, if it gets rejected. And in about 6 weeks, we built a system called MSD Online, which completely automates that process. And I know statistically it sounds ridiculous, but we cut the time to process our order by 95%, because from 4 days to 2 hours, that's currently what it takes today to place an order. And we do something like 4,000 medication orders a day for the entire Gauteng province. And for me, I'm most proud of it because of the impact we can have. In Gauteng, there are roughly 12 million people that rely on the public health system. And by our small piece of work, we're able to impact millions of people across the province. Sure. And so that gives us a lot of satisfaction.
Definitely, and in a very critical sector being health for the economy. Now, Janine, Standard Bank was quite excited about Mohammed's initiative as well, one of the 20 SMMEs that Standard Bank did support at the ITU conference. But tell us about the intervention that the bank is making there, especially as, you know, quite often you find the conversation is that banks are not doing enough to support small businesses. But why throw your weight behind this?
Sure. So I think a few comments to maybe comment on just within that. Number one, yes, we did take 20 SMEs to the ITU. We are very proud of all 20 and not just the 2 sitting here right now. In fact, we had a bigger platform where there were 40, 20 that were hosted by Ericsson and 20 that were hosted by Standard Bank, and really to showcase the talent that we've got. And we don't need to be the experts. I mean, we keep commenting on how we're not necessarily the experts in technology. We don't need to be the experts in technology because we've got the experts sitting right here with us.
Sure.
What our role is, and the role that the bank is trying to play within the space, as Standard Bank at least, is to say, how do we put our weight behind these guys? How do we support these guys and girls? Not just these guys.
I think it's fine.
Please don't be disillusioned that it's just 2 men sitting here as well. They both have women within the company that play very key roles within both of their businesses. Plus, we supported many women-owned businesses that were part of the 40 that were there at the stand as well. And how we try to look at it as the bank is we know that there are many programs that look at ideation, that look at trying to support SMEs that have an idea and getting them somewhere. Where we find there's a market that's not quite tapped into is the great, you've got something, and now what? So how do we actually support you to take that a little bit further? And we do that by leading with access to market, which is the reason why when the DTPS spoke to us about potentially partnering with for the ITU, it made complete sense to us because of the access to market platform that got provided for our SMEs there. So we lead with access to market. We know that it doesn't matter how much development you have, even how much funding you have. If you don't have the access,
Sure.
you don't have anything.
Sure.
That's how we look at it.
I mean, Janine, just to pick up on your point on where to from here with the Deputy Minister, I mean, we've hosted this ITU conference successfully so. What now? Petrus did allude to some of the interventions that you were making in the technology space. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, as Janine has said, the first thing is to say, here is a capable army, because if you go to our department, we're talking of building a capable army for the 4th Industrial Revolution. This is an army that must be well-resourced, and as she correctly puts it, it can be well-resourced, but if it doesn't go anywhere to showcase the strength, then it's of no value and it doesn't contribute anything to the lives of our people. Now, what we do as the department is to make sure that we engage with other government departments, we engage with private sectors, we engage with the big guys in the industry to say, here are young people, here are middle-aged people, here are women who are prepared to help you increase your profits. Remember, for others, it's just about increasing profits. But remember the experience and the know-how at times, because the solutions that others introduced in the 19th century are not relevant for the 21st century.
Sure.
Which is why we talk of this group that must make sure that it resuscitates also those business that were here early, but also it forecasts the future. What is it that we need to do? And therefore, by doing that, we're engaging all the OEMs to say, in the entire value chain, what role can be given? Of course, leading from the front, we had to make sure that it starts with us as government. For example, as I'm talking to you right now, we had then given a mandate to the CETA, which is the biggest procurer we know as government in terms of IT services. And then we said it's compulsory that any business beyond 30 million is given to small businesses, and that's inclusive of women and young people. But for those, again, that are above 30 million, whoever that gets to be awarded that business must make sure that 30% goes to small businesses.
Sure.
And as we do that, we're forcing them to say, whatever innovation that they have as the big guys, they must leave space. And as, like I said earlier, when they bring the new innovations in their companies also, they also increase their profits. But on top of that, not just access, how do we then expose them, working with Brand SA, working with Proudly SA, working with the ITU, the WEF, the World Economic Forum? How do we make sure that everybody globally now, because what we also encourage is to say to our SMMEs, don't just provide solutions that are looking into South African challenges or African challenges. Make sure that your solution can then address a global challenge, which is why today, as we're talking of the great things the innovations that we're doing as South Africa, we have Tesla that is housed in America, that is everywhere else, but it's a project, it's a baby of South Africa. How do we nurture? Because as we are saying, there's lots of innovations, but commercialization is what is a challenge, which is why we had to make sure that as government we engaged with the ITU and the World Economic Forum to say, how do we make sure that we leave a legacy project? When we say, yes, we have done well, we have hosted the ITU, but what is the story that South Africans and Africans can tell? And therefore we all agreed that we're going to establish the Digital Transformation Center, which will help, again, address some of the challenges that are faced by the SMMEs.
I'd like you to pick up on the point that the minister was making about the fact that we're not necessarily lacking in skills here or ideas, but rather that, other factors are at play. You were telling me that you go to a number of these conferences, and the ideas that the guys in Silicon Valley or in Europe or wherever have are not necessarily better than those of yourselves, Tep or Mohammed. But then why is it that we, or the world, speaks about their innovations and not ours?
So I'll tell you, when I first started at this in this entrepreneurial business, one of my first trips was to San Francisco, because I said, let me see what I can learn, and let me see, it's all this amazing things you hear about. And the technology or innovation that I found there was no different to what there is in South Africa. So we are definitely on par in many areas, and in many areas we are, advanced. So I think that we definitely have a level playing field. What I think is different is the ecosystem that helps small companies go from small companies to reach scale. And that's what I think is much easier to access in those markets. So for example, access to funding, access to mentors, and access to market. I think most importantly, for us as a small company, I think it's having mentorship and having people on our board or in our ecosystem who can say, hey, we have an amazing idea in retail. Do you know someone at retailer or bank X, Y, and Z who you could introduce us to so we could, discuss our product with? I think that ecosystem is what is lacking for us, and it's definitely improving. And I think there's more people who realize this, and there are more programs, like the program we worked with at Standard Bank, where they recognize the problem is access to market. Let's help these, entrepreneurs and small businesses get there. Because I definitely don't believe that we lag in any way on a tech front.
All right. Because the conversation is certainly about increasing economic growth in South Africa, and even on the continent, we know that small businesses are going to be the key economic spinners for this. So, Tsepo, speak to me about the role that you see ICT companies in the SMME space playing in driving economic activity.
I think in our economy, there's a lot of gaps that larger players don't pay attention to, and ICT-enabled SMEs can then get in and play in that space. I remember when we started with the whole citizens engagement solution that we've built, Vodacom was not in the space. Today they have the whole big department on citizens engagement. And so as ICT-enabled SMEs, we have to go out and look out for challenges that are in our society. If you look at the National Development Plan, it actually gives you indicators of what are our issues, and then you have to start thinking, what solutions can we then bring forth? And that's where we started. We identified safety as an opportunity that we can get into. So it's about identifying where the challenges are and then build solutions, not the other way around, because most entrepreneurs do make that mistake of thinking about a product or a service, and then they come out and want to offer it to the market when it's not solving any problem. The other element that I would like to speak to is, as a country, Mohammed was talking about the ecosystem that is still lacking in South Africa, but I would also extend it and say we still need to appreciate innovation a lot more. Particularly with us, essentially working in the public sector, I often say the difficult customer, we need municipalities, we need government departments to look into absorbing innovation, because there are solutions out there. So the procurement that we have in the country is not accommodating. I know there are efforts. CETA was making some announcements when we were at the ITU, so that there could be a lot more proactive approach in getting solutions, because young people are doing a lot of great things in their communities.
Sure.
We need to appreciate them. We need to give them an opportunity to prove their technology. And once they've proven it, we need to say, how do we then take it to the next step so that it can be a solution in that, instead of always consuming technology from outside.
Sure.
I often,
let me just leave you there. We'll come back to your point that you're making, because Petrus, I want to bring you in here now. I mean, in terms of getting more startups going and the role that foreign investors might have on the continent. I mean, we've seen a number. I don't know the one that the minister was talking about, but I'll say straight. I mean, Jack Ma, very interested in this continent. He plans to come back every year until he visits all 54 countries. There's also a gentleman by the name of John Collins, who is the youngest self-made billionaire by Forbes. So there's a lot of foreign capital that is interested in tapping into this growth market. So to what extent is their capital important in advancing economic growth and the role of ICT here in South Africa?
You know, Deputy Minister, I'm sure you won't mind if I make this comment. You remind me a bit of a debate we're having. We participate in the organizing committee for the investment conference that the President announced earlier in the year. And we have a debate about similar types of issues, you know. And the thing is, I think in the South African context, what I appreciate about what the Deputy Minister said, you need to strike an ideal balance, and it's not easy. You need to strike a balance between South Africa first, you know, and our local innovation, our local solutions to our issues, our problems in our society. However, at the same time, the role of foreign investment is not just money coming into the economy. It brings with it other opportunities. Let's say, for example, Siemens. If you look at what Siemens has done over the years in how it has lodged itself in the South African market with a tremendous network of South African opportunity opened up for innovators. You understand what I mean? So I think we cannot underestimate the role and the importance of bringing with a foreign investor comes not only new capital, there's employment, there's a whole bunch of other things that's beneficial to the country. But at the same time, you must then just be firm and clear as a country to say, look, if you engage with us in our economy, I'm the Deputy Minister, and our view is we want you to enable new opportunity. And I'm not thinking we're asking for rocket science or anything. I think we're being very honest, I think, as a developing society. And maybe just lastly, I think also what we underestimate, the comment I made earlier, if you look at South Africa's performance in a lot of competitiveness measures, on technological readiness, on innovation, on science and technology, there's an index called the Good Country Index where South Africa ranks 25th out of, I forget the total number of countries now, say about 100 countries in terms of science and technology. That's based on peer-reviewed scientific journal articles, patents, etc. So we actually have a very robust and an increasingly robust profile in that context. And I think that's where we need that kind of a thinking, you know, also to say, let's see what we can develop, build, innovate in our own economy, but at the same time, we live in a totally networked global economy, so we have to be open to investment, to new innovation, also coming in from the outside.
Sure. I mean, Janine, staying on this theme of funding, I mean, for those innovators and startups, Tebo told us there's a lot of young people out there doing a lot of great things. There are women, especially, that are wondering, why is it so difficult for me to get a Standard Bank to help me out? I mean, this is a perfect idea. I've got a solution to maybe one of our problems here in the country, be it for unemployment or poverty or inequality, but the banks just won't, you know, do the things to let the money be released. Can you help us understand from a bank's perspective what the issue is?
Banks have got an immense role to play in driving the community forward. It is not the only form of investment, but I will talk a little bit maybe about my experience with entrepreneurs knocking on the door looking for money. What we find is there's very often a knock on the door, and there are wonderful ideas out there. The problems that we're trying to solve are not always thoroughly thought through. And that is the honest truth. So you got to really understand what problem you're trying to solve for. And we've got plenty of problems to solve for, which is why I always believe we've got a rife economy right here, an environment that we really can leverage off on to solve for the right things. Then it's really understanding that customer that you are trying to solve for. And you'll find those that have made a success of this thus far really understand those two things very well. They understand the problem, and then they understand who they're solving that problem for. Once you've got that, you can add in the commercialization layers over it. But without those things, with just a loose idea or a vague idea, and they are sometimes really wonderful ideas, it's just how do you actually start commercializing those as well, which are the things that we start looking at within entrepreneur development, is to say, how do we help you to think about this thing that you're trying to solve in a slightly more commercial sense as well.
Sure.
At the end of the day, we want you to make money. We want you to employ other people within your business as well. And you can only do that by making money and having those sound ideas in place. Another thing that I do want to add to that, and I think it's sharing the sentiments just of the panelists here and our SMEs that have been speaking about this directly. The talent, the skills, the ability is here. It really is. There is nothing that I have seen that has made me think otherwise. I'll give you one example related directly to the ITU as well. We had, out of our 40 SMEs that were there, about 30 of them that applied for the ITU awards, all done independently by an international body. And I cannot tell you how many different people from the ITU directly came to us and said, the quality from South Africa has been incredible.
If we can just briefly wrap final thoughts on this issue of the role of ICT in advancing South Africa's economy. One last very brief thought from each of our panelists.
All I would say is to our SMME winners there and everybody out in that space, keep on innovating, because the more the innovations come, the better for the country. So,
Yes. Let's also not forget that there are many, many entrepreneurs sitting within the education space at the moment that are actually already solving for the problems that are only going to be enabled even more when we put our infrastructure into place.
Sure.
We support many of them. There's fantastic content out there. There are fantastic programs looking at creating entrepreneurs at a school-going age. They are out there. We are supporting them, and we will continue to do so.
Minister?
All I can say is that we urge everybody to come and join hands with us, the private sector, in terms of investment, so that we can indeed deploy the quality infrastructure that we're talking about. But on top of that, we want to encourage, just join Doctor from what he has said, that the innovators must keep on innovating, but also not just innovating, making sure that the innovation impacts on the policy, they're able to drive the policy directive.
And to our future employees?
We are ready to innovate. We are innovating. Not only to make money, but also to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal. All we need is the appreciation of the work that we're doing, in a sense that it should be consumed, right? So that we can be the next SAP, the next big companies that go out to the world and sell solutions.
Yes. And Mohammed?
What an exciting time to be alive.
All right. From us here at the Hyatt in Johannesburg, it is bye and see you next time.